And so my illusions were that although I did not think that Crocro's description was the most appropriate, it got a sense of people who weren't able to stand. And there's a logic to all of that. Because you find the most intriguing logic is that now we are faced with a major strike, when in point of fact, the acting prime minister is the head of Labour. How do you handle that? And so therefore, people found themselves, unbeknownst to themselves, in conditions where they have become almost helpless because of his lovely queen, Kamala. And so what we are finding, and I make it very clear, I think that what I'm trying to suggest that I think, and I could not prove it, and it's up to the listeners to hearing, that what has happened within the last year, even though there was a great promise for interracial unity and a coalition government, I think what has happened now that the blacks have really been simply marginalized. And I think that's my contention, and what the point that I tried to make there.
First of all, the acting prime minister is not the minister of Labour. He acted while Kamala was away in Guyana for one night. Well, so don't let's give the impression that MacLeod is the acting prime minister. There is a prime minister in place now. The second point I want to make. He's talking about Jack is disillusioned. He and the PNM and everybody called for the removal of Jack from the cabinet. The leader of the opposition, the PNM, called for the removal of Jack. Now they are trying to embrace Jack. But all the time they were asking for the removal, and the same prime minister refused to move Jack. And yet they were all the legal opinion, Jack cannot stay, he shouldn't stay, he should go. Now it is convenient for them to split the coalition.
But my brother, your memory seems to be very selective. I thought Anna had put together a commission, including the past president of the country, that ruled, in fact, there was no...
Are you denying that the PNM called for his removal?
No, you see, you're studying kind of sideways.
You said
I am saying that when the issue arose, when the issue arose, Mr. Annan, your attorney, who is now the Attorney General, set up brought in some experts, among whom was Ellis Clark, who in fact saw no conflict of interest. Now, in fairness to our Prime Minister, she did stick and has stuck with Jack. I'm not arguing that.
Did the PNM call for his removal? Why don't you say yes or no?
But there's none of that. I mean, yes, I think the position of the PNM is, yes, that he should not be holding two positions.
Oh, there's no enthusiasm in your position.
You're speaking about...
You're
speaking about enfranchisement of the Afro-Trinidadian members of the cabinet. And you also spoke about a wider sense of disenfranchisement vis-a-vis the labor movement. Let's take a look at that clip and you can come back and respond to it and expand a bit on it. The clip about Professor Kojo and the unions and industrial threat and how it is stemming from a sense of Afro-Trinidadians feeling marginalized.
My sense of it is that the labor unions, I think, have recognized the sort of very racist nature of our present government, its tremendous capacity to simply speak to one group, and they have become the front, I think, for a lot of issues that are taking place.
Mr. Maharaj, do you think this labor unrest is a wider example, as Professor Kojo is saying, of that sense of discontent?
I would have thought that you would have been so well briefed in this subject about the labor unrest that you wouldn't even ask that question.
But it's
because this unrest began under the PNM. For 5 years, the PNM refused to deal with this problem. Why are we not saying that? The problem is now being discussed by the PPP government. One group has already, the civil servants have already accepted. So this is a problem that my friend and his group, they instigated. They refused to give the pay rise.
But Mr. Mirage, what the labor leaders are saying is that certain promises were made to them by this current administration.
Are we admitting that this started under the PNM, the negotiation, and it went nowhere under the PNM? Let us say yes or no to that.
Yes.
Yes, but the reality is, Mr. Mirage, that in order to get into office and to get the support of labor, your Prime Minister promised certain things to the labor movement, which have not been delivered. So the unrest is happening now. How do you respond to that?
I respond to that. When they came to the treasury, it was empty because my friend was in the central bank too. He helped empty the treasury.
There have been accusations of whether the treasury is empty, whether the treasury is full, and there have been accusations. 1 minute the information the treasury is empty, 1 minute the treasury is there are bright sunny skies. So there's a mix. There's nebulous.
All right, there are bright sunny skies, but the rain is not falling yet. The sky outside there is not falling yet. When the rain begins to fall, then there are certain things that were paramount and they were put in place. But you are holding the present government accountable for the failures of the last government. The reason why Manning called an election within 2 years is because the whole country was sinking.
Mr. Maraj, dealing with that situation, although the past government were at a deadlock with the Labour movement, one of the reasons, as Jessie intonated, for the Labour adding their support to the People's Partnership government was to alleviate those problems. And in the Labour movement's eyes, those problems have not been alleviated. The promises have not been kept.
I agree with you. In 12 months, they have not been able to do all. But they have another 4 years to go. Are you going to judge them in the first 12 months? What about the rest of the year? The rest of the years? They have not been able to do everything.
Professor Kojo.
Well, I maintain my position that in fact, I personally I even agree with your position that one of the reasons why the Labour movement, Motion, and people like MacLeod and the other young man, what's his name, from a Motion party, I forgot his name. Abdullah and others, they were all hand in hand. You saw them hand in hand marching because this would be a new dawn. It would be a new day. Apparently they're disillusioned. And they're disillusioned because Penning was there, or because Penning didn't solve it. They're disillusioned because the party, which he says is his party and his government, were unable and have been able to solve it.
Within 12 months?
No, within 12 months, obviously. The fact here is that, and I'm sure it's going to be solved. I mean, it's going to be solved one way or the other. And I think sooner or later, give some, take some, it's going to be solved. So, but I think my point, which I was sort of alluding, and I still hold, again, there's no scientific way to prove it, is that I think what we see in the Labour movement is a recognition. Now, the Labour movements have always been the progressive arm of any society. Going back to people like Butler, going back even earlier, they're the ones who've made and make demands and so on. And I think that the racial divide in terms of the jamming of black people to this new government is such that there's a kind of frustration, and in my humble opinion, that is not just, not looking simply as a Labour unrest, but I think they're carrying forward what I will argue are the progressive interests of certainly the oppressed folks who happen to be both black and Indian. I think that it has that thrust. It is a political trust, I think.
Gentlemen, we seem forever destined to go down a path of divides in this country, political divides and by extension racial divides, because the groupings organize themselves politically and they also organize themselves ethnically. When can that come to an end?
It would not come to an end.
Because the country is falling apart.
No, it is not.
The distrust continues.
I agree with my friend. The country is not falling apart. By you promoting that thought, you advocating that the country should fall apart. We are not falling apart. We are the most progressive in the Caribbean.
Remember, and I think what we take for granted, we like the negatives and to emphasize the negatives. I can think of no time in this country where somebody was killed because you're Indian or because he was black. I don't see that happening. I see people working in the workplace, doing things together and so on, but we keep missing a fundamental. My friend has argued that the Indians have made it in spite of the PNM. We could debate that. But we understand that groups are always struggling. He says, for example, one of his big cases that in terms of the dividing of the national pool, in terms of festivities and so on, that the Hindus didn't get as much as they should have been gotten. Probably government is saying we're always trying to revise that. But that's at the heart of who we are. We resolve it peacefully, not violently. And that is a good thing. Now, I'm going to argue that I think in the next 5-10 years with Facebook and modern so on, that even the racial conflict will be ameliorated. But people, doesn't suddenly because you're not Trinidad, you're no longer Hindu or Christian. I mean, that's foolish.
So at the risk of being called utopian, in my perspective, it will resolve itself eventually? Is it that we're just going through the embryonic stages of this evolution?
It's not embryonic stages. Societies are always in formation. Sat made a point this morning. We are a young society. Societies are always, it take America, how much years? 100 years before there's civil rights, before they have a civil war to kill everybody. I think another 100 years to the Civil Rights Act of 65 before they could even vote. We only a little 50. And we are working together. That I could stop you, I could go to your house and say, Sada, why do something so you can cuss me?
But you did that to me, man.
Oh, well, shit, we did that.
Come on,
but I'm saying,
call them on the rain falling. Come and make noise. I have to come out in the rain and bring him in.
But see, the point is, when he gets sick, I call him, though.
Yeah.
I call him when he gets sick. But my only point is that I think that we could do that. I disagree vehemently. We said we're going to still fight each other. But we could just now, please. But I think I don't think it's true to say we are falling apart and go beyond the divide and all that stuff. What we're trying to do is resolve these conflicts and talk about better distributions on both sides. I'm not saying I'm going to point a finger at PPP and say whatever and so on. So I don't go for that argument that we're sick and we're falling back and we're breaking down. Not at all. But I'm agreeing with you that more of these discussions have to be taken place so we could talk more about the issues that confront us, not as Hindus or Christians, but as members of a society who are trying to make it in a world where this question is, and I'll use his terms, where multiculturalism is such a very important imperative.
I'm glad the public is getting a chance to see that in spite of your divergent views, you men are friends, and a society can encourage that, because sometimes people looking at you two individually do not see that interaction, and do not see that we can agree to disagree sometimes.
But why you wear a tie when Sad come? You don't wear a tie when I come here.
I wore a tie when you were here.
No, you didn't wear a tie when I was here.
You felt offended.
I was offended, yes.
Well, I'll try and wear
discrimination, but go ahead.
I cannot believe you went there.
So
we have to. We actually are almost at the end of this hour. Okay. We've got to take a break for the news bulletin, and then when we come back, we continue with the discussion.
With telephone calls.
And we can take some calls, I think.
Yes, and we will also be opening up the phone lines as well. And thanks to everyone who's been sending in their text messages, which I will share with our guests during our news bulletin time. And they'll respond to some of what you had to say this morning. So don't go far. We've got news next, and then the debate continues.